Hello, very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kitae from JAC team. Welcome to the MGTC and JAC team webinar in IGM today. MGTC is Malaysian Green Technology and Climate Change Corporation under Ministry of Environment and Water. And IGM, or International Green Tech and Eco Products Exhibition and Conference Malaysia, is Southeast Asia's largest trade event for green technologies and eco-solutions. The theme of IGEM 2021 is redefining sustainability. The pandemic has revealed the importance of long-term strategies and contingency planning, which made corporate owners to redefine sustainability, including the climate change risk. The title of today's webinar is Malaysia's Green Technology and Climate Change Action and Incentives to Industry. Today's program schedule is after this. Mr. Daiji Kojima, President of JAC team, will give welcoming remarks, followed by keynote address from Dato Abu Bakar Jafar, Chairman of MGTC. Then presentation will be given by two gentlemen from MGTC, Mr. Abdul Malik bin Atan, Head of Green Standards and Verification Center of MGTC, and Dr. Gray William Teixeira, Consultant Technical Advisor for MGTC, to explain about government initiatives in promoting green industry in Malaysia. After the presentation, we'll have Q&A session, and end of event will be around 4:30 p.m. Ladies and gentlemen, now let me invite Mr. Kojima, President of JAC team. Mr. Kojima, please.
Hi, thank you very much, Kitai-san. Good afternoon, JAC member companies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the MGTC and JAC team webinar today. I'm Kojima, President of JAC team and the CEO of Mitsui Malaysia. First of all, I'm very grateful to Malaysian Green Technology and the Climate Change Center, MGTC, for hosting this webinar today. On behalf of JAC team, I'd like to express special thanks to Professor Dr. Abu Bakar Jafar, Chairman of the MGTC, and Ms. Elina Jani, Senior Director, Business Development, CEO's Office, and Mr. Lizan Faiz Losman, Business Development, CEO's Office, and Mr. Malik Atan, Head of the Green Standards and Verification Center of the MGTC, and Dr. Gary William Teixeira, Consultant Technical Advisor for MGTC, and high officials from the MGTC and IGEM team for preparation today. MGTC is an agency of the Ministry of Environment and Water, mandated to drive the country in the scope of the green goals, climate change mitigation, and green lifestyle. And at the Dubai Expo currently being held in UAE, MGTC is playing a central role with the Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation and other ministries, under the theme of the energizing sustainability. And Malaysia is targeting to reduce their greenhouse gas emission by 45% from 2005 level by the 2030, introduce 100 billion ringgit of the green technology, and they create 230,000 green jobs. In this webinar, the MGTC will give us the message on the National Green Technology Policy and a seminar on the green investment incentives. So we are expecting an informative and encouraging webinar today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kojima. And here we have a special video message from Chairman of MGTC, Dato Abu Bakar Jafar, Chairman of MGTC.
Mr. Daiji Kojima, Vice President of the Japanese Chamber of Trade and Industry Malaysia, or JACTIM, Mr. Kazuya Kite, Chief Coordination Officer, JACTIM, distinguished members of JACTIM, honors guests, fellow speakers, and ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for participating in this afternoon's webinar on the Malaysia's green technology and climate change action and incentives to industries. Praise be to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Lord of the worlds, the beneficent, the merciful. We are grateful to Allah for His blessings that we are able to gather here this afternoon for this event. On behalf of the Malaysian Green Technology and Climate Change Corporation, in short, MGTC, I would like to take this opportunity to welcome and offer our thanks to you, one and all, for taking the time to attend this afternoon's webinar. To our international guests, selamat datang and welcome. It is my great pleasure and honor to deliver my welcoming remarks at this auspicious event, Malaysia's Green Technology and Climate Change Action and Incentive to Industries webinar, co-organized by the Malaysian Green Technology and Climate Change Corporation and JACTIM, which is held in conjunction with virtual IGAM 2021. My sincere gratitude goes to the JACTIM for being the co-organizer with MGTC for this event in shaping the green future of Malaysia, catalyzing the nation's green economy and addressing our climate change agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, the Malaysian Green Technology and Climate Change Corporation, or MGTC, is a government agency under the purview of the Ministry of the Environment and Water, in short, CASA. MGTC is mandated to drive the country relating to green growth, climate change mitigation and adaptation, and green lifestyle. Guided by a number of national policies, namely the National Green Technology Policy, the National Climate Change Policy, and the Green Technology Master Plan, MGTC's role is as much to be a catalyst as an enabler of projects undertaken largely by the private sector for both green economic growth and climate action. Under the Green Technology Master Plan, MGTC is focused on 6 sectors of the economy, namely energy, transport, manufacturing, building, waste, and water. MGTC's role is also to implement initiatives and programs in achieving the long-term targets in climate action. That is, to reduce the intensity of greenhouse gas emissions of Malaysia based on its gross domestic product, or GDP, by 45% in 2030 from that of 2005 base year. Some of the key targets of MGTC include promoting 100 billion ringgit of Malaysia worth of green investments, generation of 230,000 green jobs and 50,000 green products, and increasing the GDP contribution from the green technology sector to 100 billion by 2030. The second strategic thrust for MGTC under the Green Technology Master Plan is to provide market enablers in nurturing green technology sector. Some of the key government incentives provided by MGTC include the Green Investment Tax Allowance, or GITA, and the Green Income Tax Exemption, or GITE, in collaboration with the Malaysian Investment Development Authority or MIDA. In addition, MGTC also supports the third scheme of the Green Technology Financing Scheme, GTFS, in collaboration with Dana Jamin Nasional Berhad. Ladies and gentlemen, green technology represents a solution that balances the need for economic development with that of environmental responsibility. Its wide adoption and application will stimulate the economy, create jobs, and attract investments, as well as address numerous challenges relating to climate change. Not only that, addressing global environmental challenges offers great business opportunities, but also helps create large-scale new green industries. As the aim of this seminar is to provide greater understanding of Malaysia's green technology and climate action and incentives to industries, the organizers have arranged two presentations this afternoon. One on green growth by Encik Abdul Malik Atan, and another on climate action by Dr. Gary William Teixeira of MGTC. I sincerely hope that all participants today would benefit from this webinar. Wish one and all a fruitful discussion at the end of the two presentations. Once again, our sincere thanks and appreciations to JAKTIM for organizing this webinar, and to the entire working committees who have worked hard to ensure the program runs smoothly. I would also like to thank the speakers, moderators, audience for joining us, and extend our utmost appreciation for supporting this event. Thank you and terima kasih.
Thank you very much, Dato, for sending a great message to us. Ladies and gentlemen, now let's start presentation. First presenter is Mr. Malik Atan. He is a director in charge of Green Standards and Verification Center of MGTC, having over 17 years experience involving in the national energy and green technology development projects, which include energy efficiency project, green technology finance scheme, green technology tax incentive, national energy efficiency master plan to support Malaysia's green policy, as well as Malaysia Green Labeling Program. That one is known as My Hijau mark. Okay, Mr. Malik, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So today I would like to share with you about my topic. So good afternoon and selamat petang. So welcome to this webinar. So okay, actually I would like to share with you the topic. My topic is about the government initiative in promoting industry in Malaysia. So actually this our colleague is the interesting topic that everybody can know about this one in Malaysia. Okay, actually this is our direction. So before I proceed with the specific topic about the green initiative in Malaysia, so actually this is our direction that we would like to achieve. So every country in the world, so they have the direction to achieve these 17 goals. So actually all my related projects for initiative are related to number 12. So that focus for responsible consumption and production. Okay, before I proceed with the next topic, so this is our direction. So this national green technology policy, so we call it as a green technology policy for Malaysia. So actually was launched in 2009. So after that, we have the green technology master plan. So actually, this national green technology policy, we focus for the four main area. So number one, we focus for energy. So how we can reduce energy dependency and promote energy efficiency. So second, we will focus for the environment. So how we can conserve and minimize negative impact to the environment. And next, we have focus for economy. So how we can increase national economy through adoption of new technology. And the last focus area, we focus on social, how we can increase quality of life. And for your information, this is one of the big program. So in Malaysia that we can develop our green technology agenda. So we call it as a My Hijau program. So actually hijau is equal to green. So we can call it as Green Malaysia program. So actually for this My Hijau program or Green Malaysia program, so we have the two main area. So number one, we focus for sustainable consumption. So actually at the moment we have a few initiatives. So number one, we have the green procurement activities. So how we can create the market in the local. And also we have the green dictionary. So this very important as a reference to the user and consumer. And next we have sustainable production. So how we can assist our supply. So actually we have the two main activities. So number one, we have the green labeling. So at the moment we have the My Hijau Mark or recognition scheme. So after this I will explain what is the My Hijau Mark, or we call it as a green mark. And then we have the green industry and SME development activities. And for your mention, at the moment, government of Malaysia, we have the two incentives to our industry. So number one, we have the green technology incentive. So after this, I will explain what are the incentives available at the moment. So next incentive, we have the green technology funding scheme. So how we can assist our industry when they want to invest in a green technology project. Okay, the first initiative that we have is a government and green procurement. So we call it as a GDP. So actually, the definition of GDP, we can refer to the procurement of products, services, and works in the government area that we focus on environmental issues. So in somebody, we call it, we can summarize that GDP is equal to economy and environmental focus. Okay, actually, why the government of Malaysia, we introduced the government green procurement because we want to follow the global trend in purchasing and also the procurement activity. So normally, before this, we focus for the conventional procurement, so that we only focus for price and quality. But now we focus for the green procurement, so we can include the environmental impact during in our procurement, and in next in our agenda. So we want to transfer from green procurement to the sustainable procurement, maybe in 2025 or 2030. But at the moment, we still in progress to run or implement the green procurement, including the government sector. Okay, actually this is our GDP long-term action plan. So actually we have the specific initiative. So at the moment in our GDP, we focus for the product and services in starting in 2031. So by this year, so we want to include the procurement for works. So actually in our initiative, we will include the GDP works, beside GDP product and services. Okay, how the government of Malaysia we implement GDP? So we start in 2013. So during that, from 2013 until 2015, we implement the pilot project. So at the moment, we select 6 product group and 5 ministry and government agency that be as a pioneer to be called it as our pilot project initiative. And then 2016, so the number of product we increased from 6 to 20. and we increased the number of ministry from 5 to 12. In 2017, so we increased the number from 20 to 30, and the number of ministry we increased from 12 to 25. This means in 2017, all the ministry and government agency in federal government already implement the GDP. So in the 2020, so actually we increased the number from 30 to 40 green product services. So after this, I will share the number of GDP document can be a reference to the procurer. So actually, we have the Malaysia plan. So during the 2016 until 2020, so in our 11 Malaysia plan, we target about 20%. This means our government announced the target of 20% GDP by year 2020. And during the 12 Malaysia plan, starting this year until 2025, so the GDP target will increase from 20% to 25% that we must achieve in year 2025. Okay, actually, this is our guideline, so our publication that can be as a reference for the procurer, especially in the government sector. So actually, we have the introduction on GDP, and then we have the government green procurement guideline 2.0. That we focus for the 20 product groups. And last year, we introduced the GDP guideline 3.0 that will increase the number from 20 to 40 product groups. And the second initiative that we have in Malaysia, actually we have the Green Industry and SME Development Program. So actually we have the two objectives, how we can achieve in this initiative. So number one, to encourage the growth of local industry and SMEs to produce green product and services. This means we want to increase the number of our local green product. And the second objective, we want to facilitate green practices and green technology application in their operation, production, and business. So this means our objective, we would like to assist our industry to implement the green technology application, or we can implement green technology project. Okay, actually in our green industry and SME, we have a lot of activities. So how we can assist the industry. So actually number one, we have the business training and evaluation. So we will organize a lot of seminar, webinar to our industry. We want to promote about the green technology agenda. And next we have the sessions. So actually we have the we call it as open day. So every Wednesday from 10 a.m. until 4 p.m. So the industry can visit to MGT office in Selangor. So they can know how they can get information or assistance from MGT officer. So next we have the standard and certification facilities that we collaborate with the Standard of Malaysia, and also we collaborate with a few certification body. For example, like in Malaysia, we have the CRIM. So how we can certify our local green product and services. So next we have the activities that related to benefit of government incentives. So actually we collaborate with the MIDA. So how we can introduce the green technology incentive to our industry. And next we have the activities to promote our local green product and so our local green companies. So we participate in the exhibition and campaign. So for example, like IGM. So our commitment to participate in this IGM started in 2010 until now. So and next we have the publication that we can be as a reference to the industry and to the our people. And we have the business matching. So how we can promote, how we can export our local product services. So we collaborate with the partner. So we call it as a market. And we have a collaboration with other institutions. For example, like we have the Estimator, FMM, and also other agencies. Okay, the next initiatives actually we have the My Hijauman and Directory. So actually, My Hijauman is can be is a green recognition scheme for green product and services. Actually, this recognition scheme already endorsed by the government of Malaysia in 2015 and implemented by CASA and MGTC. So CASA is equal to Ministry of Environment and Water. So actually we have how we recognize this product. Actually the product must have must meet local or international environmental standard, for example like from Malaysia or from Japan. So actually, and then we have the mark directory. So actually this directory as a reference to the user and buyer for green product and species in local market. So actually this is our logo for My Hijau Mark. So you can see the name of Malaysia and also the My Hijau. So actually My Hijau is equal to My Green. Okay, actually why the government introduced this My Hijau Mark? Because we want to uniting all the green certification under a single mark. So for example, like in Malaysia, we have a lot of green logo and green label, so difficult to the consumer or to the user to remember all the green logo. So the government introduced the My Hijau Mark because so all the people or the consumer or the buyer can remember only one logo. Just we call it as a My Hijau Mark. Okay, there is a requirement. So if the product want to be registered in our My Hijau Mark under product category, so they must comply with our requirement. So the first is about the eligibility criteria for applicant. So this means the applicant must be a business or company entity and registered with the Malaysian registered business or Malaysian registered company. So if the product is manufactured in overseas, so they can register in our My Hijau directory as long they have the letter of appointment or authorization by the original product manufacturer. And for the products, all the product must have existing green label certification or performance and standard compliant from an independent certification body that meets minimum standard recognized by MGTC. This means after this, we'll explain what are the category or type of green label certification and also the performance and standard compliant. So actually there are four category of green product certification. So number one, as long as the product have the green label certification under ISO 14024.1 eco-label. For example, like I said, eco-label or Japan eco-label, so they can register under My Hijau Mark. The second category under green label certification, ISO 1425 type eco-label. And the third category under green label certification are the type like voluntary salary scheme. So we call it as BSS, as long as they have, for example, like energy efficient certification or water efficient certification. So they can register under the My Hijau Mark. The last category under the performance and standard compliant, as long as the product comply with the local or international standard related to the environmental, so they can register under the My Hijau Mark and also the My Hijau directory. Okay, why we have the four category? Because there is a different the comparison between the LSC requirement, for example, like from raw material and disposal. So actually, we encourage the product if they have the either have green label certificates under type 1 or other type 3 eco-label. Okay, the next group of registration is spoken for the services. So this means the service provider can register under the My Hijau directory as long they have they register with the Malaysian incorporated company. So requirement for service provider, so this means different with the product. So they must comply with the two main requirements. So number one, must be employed at least one manager or supervisor personnel with recognized professional qualification. For example, like certified energy manager. And the second requirement, they must have a green policy, written procedure or guideline related to the environmental sustainability. And next, actually, we have the My Hijau directory. So all the company or the user buyer can refer to the list of products, business, and also the companies. So in our My Hijau directory website, so you can browse all the information in the www.myhijau.my. And also we have the My Hijau directory mobile app. So you can download this mobile app either using the Apple Store or Google Play. So you can see a lot of industry and also the company and the products are already listed in the My Hijama. So at the moment we have the more than 500 companies and also more than 8,000 product and business already registered in the My Hijama directory. So actually how we promote, how we market our My Hijau registered products business. So we participate in the International Green Tech and Eco Product Exhibition and Conference. So we call it as IGM or IGM. So actually we participate from 2010. So this how we promote the green products business to our visitor. So this is our we call it initiative, how we can educate our people about the green product and services. So actually last year, so we have the virtual exhibition. Before this, we organized a physical, and but during starting last year, so we organized with the virtual event. So actually, this is our pavilion. So under the My Hijama. And also, we also organized a few campaigns how we promote the green products business to our public consumer and the user. So this actually we promote to our kids in Malaysia about the green product and services. And also we have the green gallery, so in MGTC office in Selangor. So all the visitors can visit and can see all the green product and services already registered in under My Hijau and also the directory. Okay, it is about the next initiative introduced by the government. So I will explain about the Green Technology Incentive. So actually, during the budget 2014, the government has announced that to strengthen the development of green technology, the government will provide investment allowance for the purchase of green technology equipment and income tax exemption of the use of green technology services. This means we have the two incentives. So number one, investment allowance, and second, we have the income tax exemption. And in the budget 2019, so we increase the number for asset from 9 to 40. And also in the budget 2020, so we extend the duration for incentive from 2014 until December 2023. Okay, actually, there are three green category under the green technology incentive. So number one, we have the green investment tax allowance under asset. So applicable for companies that acquire qualifying green technology asset and listed under the My Hijau directory. So actually, there are 17 registered asset already qualified under the first category. So we call it as a green asset. Okay, the second category, we have the green investment tax allowance project. So applicable for companies that undertake qualifying technology project for business or for consumption. This means under the second category, I will explain what are the activities or project can be qualified under the GITA project. The next category, we have the green income tax exemption. So we focus for the service provider. So applicable for qualifying green technology service provider companies that are listed under the My Hijau directory. This means under this category, if the service provider to be qualified under the this incentive, they must register under the My Hijau directory or under the My Hijau. Okay, the first category I will explain about the investment allowance. So kita said actually at the moment we have 17 list of product or equipment. So actually we our focus area in energy efficiency. So actually we have a lot of category of product, for example, like energy efficient transformer, energy efficient chiller, high efficiency absorption of air conditioner, and also we have the 6 product under the first area or under the energy efficiency. And then we have the renewable energy area. So we focus for the battery or energy storage. And next we focus for the building. So we have the 4 product. As long the product qualify under this GITA asset, so they can apply to MIDA and MGTC. And also for the transport, so we promote for the electric vehicle. So if the company buy any electric motorcycle, electric bus, electric MPV truck, and also electric vehicle charging equipment, so they can qualify to apply under the GITA asset. And next we have the under the waste, so we focus for the test connector. And the last one we focus for the energy efficient water pump. And for the second category, we focus for the GITA project. So actually they apply qualifying activity that can be eligible to apply under the GITA project. So the first category is under renewable energy. So as long as the project under the renewable energy, so they can apply under the GITA project. So for example, like if the company, so they implement the biomass project, biogas project, mini hydro, geothermal, or solar power, so they can eligible to apply under GITA project. The second qualifying activity is equal to the energy efficiency. So as long as the company investing in energy efficient equipment or technologies, or replace or inefficient equipment and invest in energy saving equipment, so they can eligible to apply under the GITA project. And the third activity is related to green building. So the building owner must have the green building certificate. For example, like in Malaysia, we have the GBI Green Building Index, we have the Green RP, and also we have the My Class. And the next activity we refer to the data center. So if the company purchase any energy efficient product or solution for the data center, so they can apply under the GITA project. And the last activity is equal to the waste management. So any companies which undertake or invest in waste recycling, or waste recovery, or waste treatment, and additional activities such as composting, or store, or collection or disposal, so they can apply under the GITA project. The last category we have is under green income tax exemption. So before this, we focus for the green investment as one, but this one is totally different. So we total treatment. So we have the green income tax exemption only for service provider. So we are 7 qualified services that qualify under these GITA services. So number one, as long as the service provider under the renewable energy, so they can qualify under the GITA services. The second services we focus for the energy efficiency. So any service provider that related to the energy management, so they can apply under the GITA services. And the third services we relate to the energy, any electric vehicle service provider. And the fourth, we focus for the green building and service provider. Number 5, we focus for the data center. So any company that provide the services related to the data center, so they can apply under GITA services. And number 6, we have focus for the green certification and verification. So any service company that they can provide the certification of product, equipment, or building, so they can qualify to apply under GITA services. The last services is a green township. So any service provider related to advisory and consultancy, design and feasibility study in green township and low carbon cities planning, so they can apply under the GITA services. Okay, actually this is the last initiative that we have. So we have the green skill and competency. So actually how we assist our people in Malaysia, or how we can develop our competency in Malaysia. So we have a lot of training, including the skill and also the competency. So actually our courses, so we have the awareness courses. So for example, like how we done enough to save energy bill. So we can promote to our people how they can save energy bill in their house, in their home. And next we have the courses that related to the semi-technical. So for example, like we have the energy and water management training. So we call STWNT. And very important, we also organize the training for technical and also the professional. So for example, like we have the energy manager training courses, MGTC, and also we have the HIMAS energy management courses. And at the moment, we organize a lot of training courses, so including the registered electric energy manager, so including the professional energy manager, so and also the certified professional in measurement and verification. I think that's all the information that I can share with you. So if you have any question, so you can ask after this, or you can contact to MGTC to get detailed information. Thank you very much. Back to you, Mr. Kitai.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Malik, for the detailed and latest updated information. for the government green initiative and incentives. Now, next presenter is Dr. Gary William Tesseria. He is a consultant technical advisor for MGTC and a senior researcher in the Forest Research Institute of Malaysia. He has more than a decade of experience in climate change and sustainability policy development. He also served as a special officer to ex-minister of former MESTEC, and currently the MOSTI, Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation, Yo Wing, and as a deputy undersecretary for Environment Management and Climate Change in Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment. So Dr. Gary William, please. Hello, the doctor, your mic is off and you're mute.
Thank you, Mr. Kitai. I'll go ahead and share my screen now.
Yes.
Just a moment. Let's see. Okay. Yes, we should be beginning right now. Okay. So, Mr. Daichi Kojima, Vice President of JACTIM, Yang Berbahagia Dato' Abu Bakar Jafar, Chairman of the Board of MGTC, Mr. Kazuya Kitai, Chief Coordinating Officer of JACTIM, and the distinguished members of JACTIM. It's a great pleasure and an honor to be allowed to present to you during this webinar on Malaysia's green technology and climate change action and incentives to industries. I will be speaking this afternoon on government initiatives in climate change action in Malaysia. My presentation will actually cover the following areas. I'll be covering institutional frameworks, then go into a national guidance that the ministries have come up with on forest carbon markets, as well as the voluntary carbon markets. Following that, I'll talk a little bit about the mandates from the 12th Malaysia Plan, which was recently released, as well as the mandates that come from the Malaysian Climate Action Council, which is a council of ministers. Next, I'll talk about the regulations for public listed companies, and then finally the new regulations for financial institutions before going to the conclusion. So starting right off with the institutional framework, as you know, Malaysia is in a period where we've had a number of different administrations in a fairly short amount of time. Nevertheless, we have established a settled framework for handling climate-related issues. At the very top and right below the ministerial cabinet, we have the Malaysia Climate Action Council, or MICAC. This is a council chaired by the Honorable Prime Minister. There are 16 cabinet members in this council and 13 chief ministers of states, as well as the Secretary of State. Underneath the Climate Action Council, we have the National Steering Committee on Climate Change, or the NSCCC, as it is more commonly known. It's chaired by the Ministry of Environment and Water, known also as CASA. And in this National Steering Committee, there are 12 ministries, as well as the Economic Planning Unit under the Prime Minister's Department, as well as the Attorney General's Office. In addition, under this committee, there are 7 government agencies, including the Malaysian Green Technology and Climate Change Corporation, as well as representatives of academia and civil society organizations. We have also the Ministry of Environment itself, Ministry of Environment and Water, CASA, and the division handling climate change is the Climate Change Division, or BPI. We also have the very newly established National Greenhouse Gas Center there, and Malaysian Green Tech and Climate Change Corporation is also under the ministry. For forestry and land use issues, that is handled under a different ministry, but we do have a National Steering Committee on REDD+. This is chaired by that ministry, the Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources, and under that ministry is the agency handling REDD+, which is the Malaysian Forest Fund, or MFF. Let me next go into some of the national guidance that has recently been developed. And firstly, we look a little bit at the national guidance on forest carbon markets. The objective of this guidance document is to serve as a reference for any entity, any state also within the Federation that is planning to engage in forest carbon related activities, including forest carbon trading. And this guidance identifies the roles and the functions of all the actors that are involved in forest carbon trading projects in Malaysia. The guidance also defines the responsibilities of the state governments in running the forest carbon market, as well as the responsibilities of the ministry in charge of forestry and the ministry in charge of climate change. Of course, the ministry in charge of forestry now is the Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources, and the ministry in charge of climate change is the Ministry of Environment and Water. Now, the scopes covered by this guidance document include compliance with all the UNFCCC decisions on Article 6, of course, that's the Article on International Cooperation, and Article 13, which is the article on transparency and communication. The activities must also be in accordance with Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's principles on the TACCC, transparency, accuracy, completeness, consistency, and any projects need to maintain consistency in activity data, emission factors, as well as the activities reported in the National Greenhouse Gas Inventory relating to the land use and land use change sector, as well as the forestry sector, or the LULUCF sectors. You will see that the national guidance on voluntary carbon markets, on the other hand, is somewhat similar, but there are some important differences. First of all, the objectives are the same in the sense that the entities can reference this document in relation to participation in voluntary carbon markets and related activities, but the definitions for the responsibilities are limited only to the project participant or participants, as well as the ministry in charge of climate change, which is the Ministry of Environment and Water. The scopes covered are also very similar, except for the last one, which is rewritten to reflect the fact that the activity data, emission factors, and activities reported must encompass all of the GHG sectors and not just the forestry and land use sector. There are some national guidance to both of these guidances. And essentially, what these common guidance refers to is referring to how the activity needs to be designed and what must be included in the activities. Specifically, any activity under these markets must reduce emissions, or it must increase removals of greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. The results delivered must be real and they must be measurable with long-term benefits. The risk for reversal or re-release of sequestered carbon, for example, must be minimized. The programs must not have any negative social impacts or environmental impacts, and they must all have a robust accounting system. Any of these projects must involve consultations with the public stakeholders, as well as local communities and indigenous peoples, and technology transfer needs to be necessary part of any of these activities. In addition, the national guidance also provides that the carbon must be accounted using a certified carbon accounting system, that the risks for reversals must be accounted for at least and handled, and if necessary, corresponding adjustments must be applied in the case where emissions reductions move transboundary out of the country. There must be a proper validation and verification, as well as a proper monitoring system, and the issuance and renewal of units must be done in a properly verified manner. The guidance also has instructions for registering of projects and reporting of activities to ensure that transparency is evident at all times. Right? So with that out of the way, I'll now change gears a little bit and move to some of the mandates that have come out of the Malaysia Climate Action Council. As I mentioned earlier, this is a council chaired by the Prime Minister of Malaysia, which is the highest body dedicated to providing us with direction in terms of climate change. One of the first outcomes from the council is regarding the nationally determined contribution, which is Malaysia's pledge. The most recent communication of the NDC involves a single update, whereas before the intended nationally determined contribution of Malaysia, which became the first nationally determined contribution of Malaysia, was a 45% reduction in emissions intensity of GDP relative to 2005 levels by 2030, but that was 35% unconditional and 10% conditional upon receiving means of implementation from developed countries. The updated version of the NDC is now to reduce the emissions intensity of GDP by 45% relative to 2005 levels by 2030, but the entire 45% is unconditional. The Malaysia Climate Action Council has also stated an aspiration to achieve net zero emissions by 2050 at the earliest. There's also a decision to enhance the share of renewable energy in power generation, a target of 100% of non-internal combustion engine vehicles in terms of procurement of vehicles by the government fleets, and this is by 2020. One that has been maintained for a long time now, the ensuring a minimum of at least 50% forest coverage in the country, integrating climate change as a factor in the water management infrastructure, water being critical to many industries in Malaysia, and to encourage the aspiration of net zero emissions targets among the private sector. And I'll come to a little bit more of this later. Finally, the last initiative announced by the Prime Minister's office from the MICAC meetings is the establishment of the National Greenhouse Gas Centre at the Ministry of Environment and Water. And I referred to that when I was talking about the institutional framework. The other mandates from the Malaysia Climate Action Council have come to us directly from our Minister's office. And these include, first of all, the decision to implement a cautious approach to carbon trading to minimize the impact on Malaysia's emissions commitments. Also, to develop a green recovery plan as we emerge from the COVID-19 crisis, which we hope will establish Malaysia as a hub for green economy services and technologies. And this is in line with the current concept of maintaining planetary health and adopting a holistic approach to sustainable development. Also, strengthening of the country's climate change governance. And they aim to do this by involving all stakeholders in the decision-making process, by mobilizing manpower resources, and by allocating adequate amounts of financial support. We also intend to implement a low carbon mobility development plan from 2021 to 2030, and this is expected to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 185 million tons per year, and yield a fuel savings of 150 billion, over 150 billion ringgit over the 10 years through the increased use of electric vehicles and other low carbon transportation, such as hydrogen transportation. The National Low Carbon City Master Plan will also be implemented, and this will be done at the local authority as well as the state government levels. And finally, from the Minister's Office, the announcement to develop carbon market guidelines as well as carbon pricing policies. So once again, these are the outcomes from the most recent Malaysia Climate Action Council chaired by the Prime Minister. If we move to a more recent development and look at the launch of the 12th Malaysia Plan, of course, these are the Malaysia's 5-year development plans. The 12th Malaysia Plan encompasses 13 chapters in its entirety, spread over 3 thematic areas. And climate change is addressed in 8 out of the 13 chapters. And this is a very large contrast when we compare to previous 5-year plans, where climate change appears a little bit as an afterthought. So once again, in 8 out of the 13 chapters, specifically in chapters 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 11. So if we look at that how climate change is treated, we see that it begins right away in chapter 1, where climate change is viewed as a means to reduce the adverse impacts of development on the environment, including greenhouse gas emissions and climate change. In chapter 2, where the 12th Malaysia Plan talks about restoring growth momentum, we find priority area C, strengthening effectiveness of financial intermediation ecosystems, and specifically strategy C3, promoting a sustainable and inclusive financial system. And in this area, we have a special committee formed that includes the National Bank, the Securities Commission. National Bank is, of course, the regulator, banking regulator. The Securities Commission of Malaysia, which is the regulator of the Bursa, and the financial industry, all coming together to drive and support climate change actions within the sector. The areas that they're focusing on include risk and data management, governance and disclosure, as well as the development of new products and innovations. And to accomplish this, of course, we will need a great deal of engagement, which has already begun, as well as capacity building, also which has already begun. If we move to chapter 3 of the 12th Malaysia Plan, propelling growth of strategic and high impact industries, as well as micro, small and medium enterprises, we find that climate change is identified as an issue and a challenge that needs to be dealt with, because climate change poses a challenge due to the fact that we have a growing population and increasing biodiversity loss. And climate change stands to exacerbate some of the challenges associated with these two phenomena. The next chapter in which climate change is specifically mentioned is in chapter 6, which is improving regional balance and inclusion. Here we see that under priority area B, developing sustainable cities, specifically strategies B3, we have prioritizing green and resilient urban development, where we wish to prioritize green and resilient urban development to address environmental issues, as well as to promote efficient use of resources, and to increase the resilience of cities to the impacts of climate change and disasters. Moving to chapter 7 of the 12th Malaysia Plan, enhancing socio-economic development in Sabah and Sarawak, we find that, of course, these two states located on the island of Borneo do have export-based industries that are built around natural resources, and their major cities and towns are concentrated along the coastlines, which makes them vulnerable to impacts of climate change, including floods as well as sea level rise. So given these challenges, strategy B6 aspires to promote green growth in Sabah and Sarawak and expanding the green market to create new economic opportunities while minimizing the detrimental impact on the environment and addressing climate change and ensuring natural resource sustainability. Moving from chapter 7 to chapter 8. Chapter 8 is the where you might expect the greatest amount of material on climate change. Chapter 8 focuses on advancing green growth for sustainability and resilience. And we have a number of priority areas that are relevant here. Priority area A is implementing a low carbon, clean and resilient development. And strategy A1 already talks about moving towards a low carbon nation. And under this initiative, we have something called the Race to Zero initiative. And this is for the private sector. And this includes the Employees Provident Fund, the EPF, Petronas, the National Petroleum Company, OCEL Group, the Sunway Group, Taiwan Garment Industries, as well as the Sarawak Energy industry, all of which have now made a commitment to be net zero. We have strategy A2, accelerating the transition to a circular economy, because we've identified that circular economy will yield significant efficiency gains and cost effectiveness to reduce dependency on natural resources if we can recycle and reuse more of the resources that are already in circulation, as well as to address issues relating to climate change through energy efficiency and renewable energy. The third strategy, A3, sharing responsibility in pollution prevention, is one that specifically addresses the phasing out of hydrofluorocarbons, HFCs, which, as we know, although they're not covered by the UNFCCC, are nevertheless covered under the Montreal Protocol. Even though they are not an ozone depleting substance, but actually a very potent greenhouse gas. Strategy 4 looks at increasing resilience against climate change and disasters. And this is where we focus actually on adaptation. And we'd like to have evidence-based and risk-informed actions, as well as integrated approaches to implementing adaptation measures and disaster risk reduction, as well as development planning to reduce the impacts of climate change. And this can be done through early warning systems, as well as disaster response preparation. In many cases, some of these are already in place, but the recovery measures need to be strengthened so that we can recover more quickly when these events happen. The other part of Chapter 8 involves moving to Priority Area B, which is managing natural resources efficiently to safeguard natural capital. And under this part of the 12th Malaysia Plan, we have strategies B1, conserving natural ecosystems. And the idea here is to develop a blue economy, which will govern coastal and marine areas and the socio-economic activities that they are associated with, and a blueprint that will optimize ocean resource use and create alternative sources of income for local communities, as well as to undertake risk assessments to determine the level of exposure of populations and businesses to coastal disasters and sea level rise. Priority Area C talks about strengthening enabling environment for effective governance, and specifically C1, and enhancing or strengthening environmental governance, talks about finally developing some legislation on climate change to enable more coordinated and effective climate action at all levels, as well as strengthening environment-related enforcement to ensure that effective implementation of legislation in deterring activities that may be damaging to the environment or that may erode biodiversity and sustainability. Finally, there's also an effort to strengthen governance for climate change and align with Malaysia's international obligations under the convention. Strategy C2 under Priority Area C talks about scaling up the green financing and investments. And this is the other part of the equation, because without green financing and investments, you will not be able to move as quickly in the new areas that require green technology. So we have the Joint Committee on Climate Change, or the JC3, and the Climate Change and Principles-Based Taxonomy, or the CCPT, developed by the National Bank, that categorizes economic activities based on their impacts and climate change, so that they can actually be leveraged. And I'll talk a little bit more about the CCPT when I talk about the impacts on the financial sectors. Okay. Finally, we have the input from Chapter 9 of the 12th Malaysia Plan, which is enhancing energy sustainability and transforming the water sector. And under priority area B, which is transforming the water sector, we note the need to strengthen the governance at all levels for managing water. And we want to integrate this management so that we can address challenges related to urbanization, as well as land use and climate change, and ultimately the management of water resources, so that we can maximize the efficiency of water use, and even bring water into the circular economy, making water a source of revenue as opposed to a cost center. And finally, in Chapter 11, we do understand that the need for data is very important, particularly big data. And we identified that we would have greater economic efficiency and productivity and enhanced quality of life if we are able to utilize data appropriately and move deeper into the fourth industrial revolution, or 4IR. Right. Now, at this point, we've exhausted the mandates from the 12th Malaysia Plan, and I will move to the next section of the presentation, which is actually some regulations on the public listed companies in Malaysia. But before that, I'd like to talk a little bit about why perhaps the public listed companies need to be concerned. Well, the Swiss RE Institute has already identified that if we do nothing to address climate change, we could lose close to 10% of the total economic value in global markets, and GDP would be 11 to 14% less in the world if we have this change, this climate change, and we don't do anything to address it. In terms of transition risks, which is not being prepared with policy and possible unilateral measures by other countries, we might have the greatest impacts in utilities and materials and energy sectors, and they might lose between 40 to 80% of the earnings per share. In the Pacific, the revenue-weighted earnings could decrease as much as 20%. Whereas in the Americas and Europe, they might decrease by as much as 15%. So companies will actually be impacted because they could lose their ability to repay debt, and the existing collateral that they have might be developed because they might be exposed and threatened to climate risk as well. Global credit losses from power and oil and gas systems alone are estimated at between 50 to 300 billion US dollars in terms of outstanding debt. Well, where does Malaysia stand in this? If we look at the top and bottom 5 climate economic index ratings, we see that Malaysia is close to the last place there, and many of our indices make us appear to be fairly vulnerable. In terms of dryness, perhaps we're not so bad, but in terms of the wet, if you look at the third column of numbers, you'll see that Malaysia is ranked 23, which means that we are possibly quite susceptible to floods, which means excesses of water in the event of extreme weather events. But what Malaysia has going for it can be seen in the second to last or next to last column, where we looked at our adaptive capacity rankings. And there Malaysia ranks fairly low compared to its peers in the area. Right. So of course, in that column, a lower number is better, and Malaysia still has a fair amount of adaptive capacity. Right. Publicly listed companies in Malaysia should also be concerned because the most desirable outcome, if we manage to achieve below 2-degree warming, it would prevent up to 10% of the anticipated mid-century global GDP loss. And in areas where the impacts are expected to be greater, the avoidance of this loss might be as high as 25% if we can meet the Paris targets. And in addition, there is a great investment potential associated with the move to address climate change. 2.4 trillion annual investments are out there looking for green solutions. USD 500 billion annual increase in global energy investments in green energy sources, all looking for generation of non-fossil power. And renewable energies is estimated to take up 80% of the growth in electricity demand all the way up to 2030. Right now, solar PV looks to be the main beneficiary, but others such as biomass and biogas are close behind. Some of the pathways to greater transparency and disclosure involve international initiatives and organizations. And of course, for Bursa Malaysia, they have utilized now the FTSE for Good. Of course, there are many others. There's Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, or TCFD. There's the SBT, or Science-Based Targets Initiative, GRI, the Global Reporting Initiative, the Corporate Reporting Dialogue, CRD. A program that's been around for a long time is the Carbon Disclosure Project, or CDP. And some standards, for example, the Climate Disclosure Standards Board, the International Integrated Reporting Council, the IIRC, as well as the Sustainable Accounting Standards Boards, SASB, have been around for a while as well. Some domestic initiatives, and I'll talk a little bit more about this as well. Of course, Malaysia's Code on Corporate Governance has now been updated and requires corporate entities to report their greenhouse gases and climate change actions. We have the JC3 that was mentioned earlier, the Joint Committee on Climate Change. And under the financial sector, we have had the VBIAF, or the Value-Based Intermediation Assessment Framework, which is part of the rationale also then for the Climate Change and Principles-Based Economy, or the CCPT, which I'll talk about separately. Right. So currently Bursa Malaysia is encouraging public listed companies to join the FTSE for Good index. Of course, this is a series of ethical investment stock market indices, and inclusion is based on a range of corporate social responsibility criteria, such as environmental sustainability, relationships with stakeholders, good attitudes to human rights, strong supply chain labor standards, and as well as a strong policy against bribery. But the index excludes companies that are involved in tobacco production, nuclear weapons, conventional weapons systems, or the coal electricity generation industry. And under this program that's been run by Bursa Malaysia, if you look at the levels involved in the FTSE for Good, it requires participation up to level 3. And if you look under level 3, you will see that you have to meet level 2 requirements and lower level requirements. But you also need to have some form of target setting, either a long-term target setting or a short-term target setting for your corporate emissions activities. And this is something that as we speak, Bursa Malaysia is actually building capacity among the public listed companies that are involved with Bursa Malaysia. If you have any doubts as to some of the repercussions for perhaps not towing the line on some of these initiatives with respect to environment and governance, we can see from recent events, as well as some historical events. The unilateral and regional measures, of course, began with the European flights originating and terminating in the EU, where there was a surcharge assessed for emissions. Then, of course, we have the renewable energy directives of the EU that at first stimulated the production of renewable fuels, but then also now under RED II is actually capped the importation of palm methyl ester into the EU as a consequence of the linkage to global emissions. We have heard recently in the news that perhaps the EU might begin implementing carbon border adjustments for products and services that have a high carbon footprint. And more recently, we've had the US ban the imports of and seize Malaysian rubber gloves shipments, as well as palm oil shipments from 2 major corporations. And finally, most recently, just a few days ago, we've had the announcement coming from the COP26 in Glasgow that there are now some net zero shipping lanes and ports of call that have been identified, where countries are now putting or listing a criteria that ships wishing to utilize those ports need to have accounted for and offset their greenhouse gas emissions associated with international shipping. So I don't have much time left, so moving very quickly to the National Bank Climate Change Principles-Based Taxonomy. We note that, of course, there are physical impacts associated with climate change, and that these can have strong repercussions coming back and affecting the entire value chain if your production systems are interrupted by extreme weather events, or if prices change. That means production price cost is going to change, and this might impact things that you have, such as collateral and loan repayment. Okay? If we look at the transition risks, we also see the same sorts of impacts, that failure to comply with policies, or failure to prepare for policies in related areas, either from importing countries that we've talked about earlier, associated with the border carbon adjustments. Like all these things have the capacity to actually impact your ability, perhaps in the future, to finance your operations. All right. So the National Bank has put in place the climate change principles-based taxonomy. It essentially divides economic activities into 3 broad categories. Either your economic activities are climate supporting, they are transitioning, and categories C2 and C3, or they are on the watch list. Right? And essentially, if you look at the next slide, what you will see is that climate supporting if it has mitigation impacts, or if it has adaptation impacts and no significant harm to the environment, then it's deemed as climate supporting. If there are significant impacts to the environment, but they are addressed and they are remedied, then your economic activity is regarded as transitioning. But whether or not you have mitigation or adaptation benefits, but if the harm to the environment is not addressed, then you are on the watch list. And of course, the way the development of products is being set up, if you are in C1, then you might have access to perhaps better terms for your loan, lower interest rates, for example, a longer duration for the loan. But if you are either in the transition or particularly in the watch list, you might have to deal with higher interest rates and shorter terms in essentially less hospitable conditions for your financing, whether it's financing for operations or financing for capital. Right? So I'm out of time, so let me get to the concluding slide. The government of Malaysia is on the whole responding very decisively in line with global efforts to address climate change by adopting a whole of government and a whole of society approach. And under this approach, we have a comprehensive institutional framework to oversee and to manage all climate actions in the country. We have newly published guidance documents to address forest carbon as well as the voluntary carbon markets. Climate change now features very strongly in the 5-year development plans, as I mentioned. Chapters 1, 6, 7, 8, and 9, 5 out of the 13 chapters. And the other chapters specifically deal with sustainability as well. Carbon trading and carbon pricing mechanisms are under development, and we can expect very shortly that there'll be regulation and enforcement of climate change legislation. And this is also under development. And finally, public listed companies, as well as the financial sector, financial institutions are already currently bound by regulations governing disclosure of greenhouse gas emissions, as well as exposure to climate risks. And they are being strongly encouraged to set emissions and disclosure targets, as well as to state the conditions as a condition for listing or for qualification for financing. Right? So with that, once again, I'd like to thank JACTIM for this opportunity, and I'd like to turn it back to Mr. Zayakite to take us further. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Doctor, for the detailed presentation on the latest information of government initiatives, Malaysia's position, and the current situation. Now, ladies and gentlemen, now we would like to enter a Q&A session. Prior to this webinar, we already received related questions from our members. And I would like to ask Doctor and Mr. Malik to give answer one by one. First question we already have is, COP26 is now being held in Glasgow, England, as a doctor just mentioned before. What kind of commitment will Malaysia likely make in the end? So this one is maybe for the doctor.
Thank you very much, Kitai-san. As you know, the COP26 or the 26th Conference of the Parties to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change is a continuing negotiation to finalize the modalities, procedures, and guidelines, or the rules, as it were, for the Paris Agreement. And the commitments for the countries are actually reflected more in the nationally determined contributions, or the NDCs. So prior to departure for the COP, Malaysia already indicated in its updated nationally determined contribution that it would remove the conditionality from the remaining 10% of its pledge to reduce the emissions intensity of GDP. And in the end, that is what Malaysia's commitment will be until the next update to the nationally determined contribution. The goal in Glasgow is to actually arrive at COP decisions on some of the outstanding issues. And the two most prominent outstanding issues possibly are Article 6 related to the international cooperation, as well as Article 13, which involves the transparency and reporting mechanism. So, of course, as you know, being a COP, it's a great opportunity for public announcements. And as you may have noted from news recently, the Honourable Minister is in Glasgow, and he has announced that he will actually join the Leaders' Declaration on Forests and Land Use, as well as signing the Global Methane Pledge. So those are the two documents that the minister has indicated that Malaysia will join at this COP26 in Glasgow. I hope that adequately answers the question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Doctor. And next question is this. Through this COVID pandemic, we learned that the balance between disaster countermeasures and securing socio-economics is very important. New approval for coal-fired power plants has been suspended in order to reduce greenhouse gases. But what kind of transition measure is the government considering to secure power supply until carbon neutral? This one is maybe a doctor, okay?
Yes. Thank you once again for the question. It's a very pertinent question. As I mentioned earlier, in the 12th Malaysia Plan, renewable energy is a big part of the 12th Malaysia Plan. It's mentioned in chapters 1, chapter 6, 7, 8, and 9. And the primary area is, of course, chapter 9, which is entitled Enhancing Energy Sustainability and Transforming the Water Sector. If you look at the 11th Malaysia Plan, the preceding 5-year 11th plan, we had initiatives dealing with energy generation from combined cycle gas, from ultra supercritical coal, from hydroelectricity, as well as from cogeneration. And this time, under the chapter 9, we actually have energy policy being developed that is going to be new energy from clean and sustainable sources, including hydrogen, of course, as well as a communication plan. In addition to that, we have under strategy A2, ensuring sustainable oil and gas, that we intend to develop a sustainable domestic oil and gas sector, and very importantly, scale up on the use of biofuels. I do need to point out, however, that in the area of energy policy, the ministry in charge is not CASA, not the Ministry of Environment and Water, but the Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources. And so the area of energy policy, which covers questions 2 and questions 3, is most accurately directed to a different ministry. But based on the 12th Malaysia Plan, I'm comfortable producing at least these responses for you because of their prominence in the 12th Malaysia Plan.
Okay, thank you, Doctor, again.
Yes.
And the third one is also related to the conventional energy plant again. And the question is it possible to consider incentives or transition finance for improving the efficiency of conventional coal-fired power generation, or introducing new technologies such as ultra supercritical power plant?
Yeah, once again, thank you for the question. To some degree, the answer is actually in the previous question as well, because we built our first ultra supercritical power plant under the 11th Malaysia Plan. Now, of course, there have been announcements since then that there's been a suspension on the development of new coal-fired power plants. But once again, because energy policy is outside the jurisdiction of this ministry, I'm afraid that we'll need to see what transpires beyond the publication of the 12th Malaysia Plan. So if we need further details that go beyond the 12th Malaysia Plan, I will not be able to answer that question. That will have to follow up as subsequent developments in the implementation of the 12th Malaysia Plan, the energy section of which will be headed by the Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Gentlemen, and here we have some, rather, basic and essential questions from listeners. And this is, okay, many countries and companies, including Malaysia, they have set a target value of carbon neutral or net zero. How is this different from zero emission? Shouldn't we write zero emissions?
Once again, thank you for this question. And this question is a very interesting question. It's also technical and actually quite theoretical. We as human beings, technically, we are not net zero even because all of us produce CO2 as a part of our daily lives. But when we talk about carbon neutral or net zero, what we are talking about is actually offsetting or compensating for the emissions that we produce. And we can use offsets that are derived from avoided emissions. For example, there's a program that takes a baseline of emissions of 100 million tons and reduces that by half to 50 million tons, which means that you've avoided 50 million tons. And therefore, you can use these avoided emissions to counteract or to offset another emission of 50 million tons. Right? And then there can also be offsets that are from removals, which some regard as more beneficial, since the atmosphere is actually seeing a removal. So in other words, if you plant trees that are going to survive perhaps over 100 years, then you can count that the atmosphere has actually seen a removal of that amount of CO2. And so if you use credits based on removals for offsets, then you can say that you are at least net zero in terms of your emissions. Aspirationally, of course, the convention has always indicated that it would be best not only to reach absolute zero, which means not using any offsets at all, but by using renewable energy, only renewable energy, and by using green technologies to actually bring your corporate emissions down to zero as a desirable. And in some cases, and in some industries, even go carbon negative, which means having your industry actually absorb more carbon from the atmosphere than it emits, which would mean that you are then carbon negative. And in some cases, we might see that with the current carbon budget of the planet to keep the temperature rise to below 2 degrees or 1.5 degrees, we would actually need a significant amount of corporations and countries to go carbon negative before 2050 if we are to meet some of these targets. So aspirationally, of course, we all would like to be absolute zero emissions. But for Malaysia to do that, Malaysia needs to first peak, which means that our emissions should no longer be increasing, after which we can actually begin absolute reductions in emissions. Thereupon, we might be able to reach net zero, hopefully by 2050, and thereafter to further reduce emissions down to absolute zero. So once again, this is a theoretical concept, and I hope that we can be clear on some of the definitions about this. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Doctor. I also didn't know the definition of all those words. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, our time is because of the time strain. The next question should be the last one, and it looks like we are still having some question. And for those questions, we try to give answer later on, if it's possible, on JACTIM website. Okay, last question is, this is about Gita, and regarding green investment tax allowance. Can we apply any type of investment as long as it seems to be the energy conservation? For example, the replacement of lighting system to LED, or introducing inverter system, or cogeneration system. Those are not like solar panel or the other renewable energies? This is a question.
Yes, yes,
Hi.
Mr. Ketai, yeah, Mali from MGTC. So actually
Hi,
for
thank
this question, so the answer is yes. So the company that invests in the energy conservation, conservation, so can apply under this KITA project. So actually, this category is one of the qualifying activities. So before this, I mentioned about the number 2. So we focus for the energy efficiency. So as long as the investment under this energy efficiency activities, so the company can apply under KITA project. Yeah. So for example, like if the company they want to invest in the energy efficient chiller, boiler, or air conditioner, and can be classified as capital expenditure, so they can apply under this KITA project.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Malik. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much again, Dr. and Mr. Malik, for your presentation and the question and answer session. Finally, we'd like to express our great thanks again for that Abu Bakar and the MGTC staff, presenters, and the IGM team, distinguished guests, JAC team member, and ladies and gentlemen. Now, I would like to close this webinar today. Thank you so much. Anything from the Gita, the MGTC, Doctor?
Yes, Kitai-san, on behalf of the Malaysian Green Technology and Climate Change Corporation, I would like to thank once again Jaktim and President Kojima Daichi for helping us to convene this and for hosting this event. Also to yourself, Mr. Kayuza Kitai, for an excellent moderation of this event. And we hope to meet again at some point in time, preferably when we can meet face-to-face to further strengthen the ties in trade between Malaysia and Japan. So on behalf of MGTC, with great thanks to all of those involved, express our gratitude.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Kojima, can you close this? Can you say something for the closing as President of JAC team?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. Anyway, the time is already coming to the end, but anyway, thank you very much for the MGTC's explanation. We really appreciate that, and then hope that we can work together for a better future for Malaysia. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much again, everybody, and thanks for the joining. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.